Okay, this is the Algebra 1, Unit 2, Lesson 4 video over relations, functions, equations, and inequalities. This is just a very basic overview, more of a vocabulary-focused lesson. So I'm going to talk through just some basics around the vocabulary of relations, functions, and equations and inequality. So a relation versus a function. Okay, a relation is just any set of ordered pairs. And when they say ordered pairs, we mean numbers or things that have some kind of relationship. So an ordered pair is referring to these. This is a pair of numbers, 1 and 3, 2 and 5, 10 and negative 1. These are each ordered pairs. You can also see relations being written as a table or some other kind of relationship way of showing that relationship. But in general, when we talk about a relation, we're just talking about any set of ordered pairs. Whereas a function specifically is a type of relation where there is a direct connection between the numbers. So we can predict, in other words, what the relationship is. So whereas up here, these numbers don't appear to have any real reason for them to be connected in a relation. In a function, we have this idea that like there's a connection from the x or the domain, is what we call that, to the y or the output. So there's a couple different ways to talk about it. X and y are typically what you see. Is also known as the input and the output. It's also known as the independent variable, which determines a change in the dependent variable. These are important concepts. You see these in math and in science. But in a function, there's a direct kind of connection or way that we get from our x to our y, our input to our output, our independent variable to our dependent variable. Okay, that's all discussed up here. So when we talk about a function, there's a couple of different ways you can represent a function. You can represent a function as a list, which is what I showed you earlier. It would be something like this. You could put it in a table. You could put it in a graph. Rather, I would probably want to put this in as a graph of different points. Or you can write it as what we call a rule. We call this function notation. And that would be like this. I should fix that R. It doesn't look quite right. A rule. And that would look like this. And the way we read this is the function of x is equal to 2 times x. Now, I've made all this work and match up, but that would be an example of a function rule. So functions can be listed in all these different ways. And you see examples of that throughout the lesson. So I'm kind of summarizing what you see here. But the idea here mainly is that this equation that we wrote, this is kind of the thing that predicts the dependent variables, right? 2 times the x value gives me the value of the function y, also known as f of x. So that's kind of your difference between a relation and a function. So in general, a list of ordered pairs, that's going to be a relation. A function is typically going to be seen written out as a rule. And then this lesson is also going to introduce the difference between equations and inequalities. So an equation is literally just a statement declaring that things are equal. So it could be like 2x equals 3y plus 4. That would be an equation. And again, the key here is that there is an equal sign. Whereas an inequality is going to be something like this. 3 plus y is less than x minus 7. Okay? Here, there's an inequality symbol. The inequality symbols that you see are going to be your greater than or your less than, and then they will either be greater than and, oops, wrong way, greater than and equal to, or less than or equal to, or without it. So these would be your greater and equal, greater and less, but these are the different kinds of inequality symbols that you'll see. So in the lesson, so basically all they want you to do in this lesson at the bottom is just, again, first some vocabulary. So use the bold-faced words at the top and the vocabulary throughout the lesson to answer those. Should be pretty straightforward. But then they want you to categorize as equations, functions, or inequalities. So remember what I told you is that functions and relations are both able to be represented as, I'll scroll up here, as lists of ordered pairs or as a function notation. So what I'm telling you is if they ask you about functions, you should be looking for lists and you should be looking for rules that have the notation f of x. So looking at number 3, you should be able to see which ones go with that. And then all you have to do for equations and inequalities is find the ones where there's an equal sign with x and then ones where there's an inequality with x. So if it has the f of x notation, it is automatically a function. Any other kind of equations or inequalities that don't have that are going to be equations or inequalities depending on the symbol that's being used. So you're just categorizing in these two examples here. So again, lists of numbers are functions. Anything in function notation is a function. Anything with an equal sign and no function notation is an equation. Anything with the inequality symbol is an inequality. And that's pretty much it.